Serious. What family secret were you let in once you were old enough? Oh my. Alright, I have an order for this. It's a list, in a manner of speaking. So, number 1. My grandfather killed his own son by throwing him on the floor because he was crying. He was just a couple months old. Number 2. My uncle tried to rob a bank and ran away by foot. He later on got married and his wife ended up committing suicide. At the time, the police thought that my uncle killed her, since he had a criminal past, but he didn't. He was at work and there were witnesses. Number 3. I have multiple half-siblings. And yes, my dad was and still is unfaithful. Number 4. My grandfather burned the house down with his wife and children inside with the intention of them dying. My grandmother ran away with her 7 or 8 children. I don't recall. And she asked the priest that she worked for, I think she cleaned his house, to give her a space to stay. He ended up giving her a home that an old lady left for the church, and if I'm not mistaken, she was paying it little by little. Number 5. My aunt's neighbor, who I went to the beach with when I was little, apparently killed his own wife abroad. And number 6, there was a rumor that my uncle's kids weren't his.
This may not be the darkest response to this thread, but it is certainly dense. Holy shit!
Well, to be honest, I have many stories like this one. If you want some story time, just ask.
Heck yeah! I'm down for the story time! Let's do it! Please do tell!
Oh my. You are probably the only person that is going to read this, but sure, why not? My mom knew about the affairs my dad had. He was cheating on her since the beginning of their marriage. And my dad used to go with these women, technically prostitutes, in our barn. It's near our house, probably a 15-minute walk. And my mom followed him and saw it. But he denied it, and still denies it to this day. My mom was only 100% sure when one of his mistresses had cancer, and it was terminal, and she went up to my mom and confirmed it and begged for forgiveness. I was there when this happened. I supposedly have multiple half-siblings because of my father. The mistresses fucked up my family. I feel really sad about the one that had cancer. She was raped by her father constantly growing up. She ended up getting pregnant and left the baby in the dumpster while she was abroad. Her father was an alcoholic and they lived near a big fall. He fell while he was drunk and became paraplegic, and she was the one left to take care of her father. Her other sisters no longer lived at home. While she did, her mother was already old, so she couldn't physically take care of him, change diapers, etc. And while she changed his diaper, or she got close to him to feed him or give him the medication, he used to assault her, touching her breast. And he tried to rape his other daughters, but they fought back. One of his mistresses, let's call her Mary, had a boyfriend. The name of this boyfriend is John, and they had a child together. She had a daughter from a previous relationship. Her name is Michelle. John was molesting Michelle during her teenage years. I think it started when she was 13 or 14, I'm not sure, while her mom was at work. Now Michelle is an adult, and she is pregnant with John's second child. Mary in the beginning blamed Michelle, but now she realizes she was only a child when this happened. Oh, let's continue with Mary. Before she had Michelle, she had another child. Michael and his dad left. Mary was a terrible mother, so she ended up leaving the child with his godparents. They ended up keeping him and raising him, and in my country, people with babies get aid from the government. And Mary didn't want to give the aid to the godparents because it's my child, it's my money. Oh, and these two mistresses are sisters, and their mother is also an awful person. Remember I told you that the mistress with cancer was molested by her father? Well, her mother knew about it. At the time, she had two little girls that were still in primary school, while her other children were already adults, over the age of 18. So basically, someone at the school contacted Child Protective Services to come to school and take away these little girls because their father molested one of her sisters. So it was expected that he was also abusing these two girls. Nothing was ever confirmed, and also he was an alcoholic, as I said earlier. He was never charged with anything about any case, but there were rumors and almost every single person knew. So when the cops got the girls at school, my mom saw this, they were crying and begging for their mom. And the Child Protective Services in my country, if you're a single parent, they will pay for your rent and give you money to take care of your children. This mother had two options. Number one, she either kept her daughters but had to leave her husband, or number two, her daughters would be put in the foster care system. Guess which one she chose? She chose to put her children in the foster care, and every single time I wonder what was going on inside her head. One of the girls ended up being adopted, and the other one wasn't. And according to Mary, the sister of the mistress that had cancer and was raped by her dad, he also tried to rape her one time she told this story. Basically, her father was working in a secluded piece of land, and her mother asked Mary to go there and give him his lunch. She had a basket with his lunch, and when she got there, her father tried to sexually assault her, and she threw the basket and ran away. About my family. Remember my grandfather? The one that killed my uncle and burned the house down? Well, my mother's family lived in a rural area, and my grandfather went to the center of the city to work, and at the time it wasn't common for people to go there unless they had to go to the hospital or something. Basically, my grandfather had another family in the center and one in the rural area. Well, technically he was married to my grandmother. After he left jail for killing his son, he went with his other family. But he still came sometimes to my grandmother's house, threatening her. My grandfather was really abusive towards his children. My mom had a lazy eye, and he would always make fun of her because of it. And one of his favorite punishments was grabbing my mom's hair and slamming her into the ground, and then he would slam her onto a bed and repeat. When I was at school, I found out that I had cousins there that I never knew about because they were from my aunt, from my dad's second relationship, and they were in the foster system. I don't know why though. If you want more, just message me. Sorry for the long post though.
Dear Lord, that lady, she've just let her dad rot and get bed sores. May that wasted a human being rot in hell.
Well, when she eventually passed away due to cancer, he was still alive, but he was really ill. He ended up passing away a couple of months later. I still can't wrap my head around her staying, living in the same house as him and taking care of him. I visited him when I was little, and when he was already paraplegic, and he just seemed like an old man. When I went to their house, when I was older, around 13 or 14, he was just looking at me and making sounds. At the time, I just thought that it was him being an old paraplegic man. But now, knowing how perverted and sick his mind was, I question and I wonder about it. Oh, I also have another story revolving an old man. I don't know if you want this or not, but here we go. When I was on 8th grade, I was going to the bus stop, around 5 minutes from my house. And when I got there was this old man eating cookies, and I was like, okay. At the time, there were 2 buses. The first one was the school bus, and the second one was the bus to the center. It was quiet. And this man says, excuse me. And since I can remember every single time that I was at the bus stop and there were older people, they would always ask me on which bus they should get on or how long it would take for the next bus to come, etc. Anyway, so I reply, yes. And this man asks me if I'm the daughter of this person whose name I just don't remember. And to that I reply, no, that's not me, sorry. Well, a couple minutes go by and he asks me, I'm sorry, but are you married? I say, I'm not. And then he asks, do you have a fiancé? To that I reply, no. And then he asks, do you want to marry me? My reaction at the time was just pure shock, but when I came back to my senses, I just replied, no. He kept talking, saying that he had a big house. Spoiler, he didn't. He lived in a hen house. And that he was a very rich and powerful man. Spoiler, he wasn't. And that if I wanted to, we could catch the bus that was going to the center and get married there. But I just kept repeating, no, I'm fine, thanks. And at that moment, my dad's mistress Mary walked by with her daughter, and she knew that this man was weird, and she stayed with me till the school bus came. When I got to school, I was telling the story and laughing with my friends, but the next weeks were horrible. Since he knew my bus stop, this man would stay there waiting for me. Not waiting at the bus stop specifically, but waiting at a nearby spot, like on the other side of the street and at the coffee shop, close to the bus stop, and so on. One time I went to a close restaurant with a friend of mine. We ate, and at around 5 p.m. I was going back home. The restaurant was 25 minutes away from my house, and he was in the same street as me. I was going down and he was going up, and he just looked at me and made this horrible smile. But for my luck, literally to my left was a house of a friend of mine's. I ran there. I didn't even know if he was there or not. I just went up the stairs and knocked. He opened up, and I was shaking. And I was speaking right. That old man stayed at the top of the hill waiting for me to come out of the house. I stayed there for hours with my friend, and the man eventually left. And one day, I just didn't see him anymore. Rumor has it that he tried to do something with this girl against her will. But I'm not 100% sure, so take it with a grain of salt. He ended up moving into his daughter's home because he was living in bad conditions. One time, I was at the bus stop. I took the one that wasn't the school bus because the normal one came earlier, so I would get home quicker. And when I get in, I see him sitting right there. He was only a couple of seats away from me. When I left the bus, he was looking at me and he even tried to stand up, but it was too late. The bus had already closed the doors. Sometimes I still see him in the bus, and every time I just question, why the fuck does the daughter let him wander around knowing that he's not mentally sane?
Oh my god, this is just too much. Your family's history is like textbook generational trauma. I hope you're okay and doing well.
Well, to be fair, my family is really crazy and big. I also have other stories. It's just a giant mess. Besides my father being an alcoholic, everything is fine now. I'm soon moving to another part of the country, really far away from here.
Reading stories like this, I always wonder why God gives daughters to such a man. What was the fall of that one baby son who got slammed to the ground? It's depressing.
Thank you so much for your concern. It's fine. And that's all gone in the past.
Geez, that's terrible. I hope things are better for you these days.
Now everything is okay. Don't worry. Now everything is okay, so don't worry. I haven't seen him or heard from him in at least 3 months.
That's awful. I am so sorry. You should write a book.
Oh, whoa. Writing a book? I'm not sure. I don't know if I have the facilities for that, but I definitely have the stories to write one.
You actually should. You got good stories and good storytelling.
Writing a book? I'm not sure. I don't know if I have facilities for that, but I definitely have the stories to write one.
If anyone ever questions whether or not ignorance is bliss, I will guide them here. Seriously, you have too much messed up shit around you. I hope you are doing okay and get to move a million miles away from this if you haven't already.
I never could have imagined that sharing the stories would generate so much love and attention. Thank you so much for worrying. I'm starting university in the fall, in another part of the country, really far away from there.
This makes me think the following. I feel like if there is one dark story in a family, it really ends up being the only one. When my grandma passed away, my dad had to sit me down and explain a thing or two, and ended up unraveling a lot more than just that. Also, holy shit, fuck you, grandpa. That is so awful, you poor grandpa.
Your words are so kind. Your words are so kind. Don't get me wrong, she suffered a lot. But she was also an awful person. She was also abusive towards her children, and she always played favorites with her children and with her grandchildren. She lived at my house, but eventually my mother couldn't no longer take care of her. My dad was an alcoholic, and I was born with a disability. So she went to live with my other aunt. And this aunt had a daughter, and she would constantly beat her if she wrote or picked up stuff with her left hand. Back in my grandmother's days, being a lefty apparently was like committing a crime. Lol. She was physically and mentally abusive towards my mother, even though She suffered a lot, but she wasn't a saint.
Now I have a question. At the very beginning, you mentioned 6 stories in a short summarized list were one and for the same grandfather.
Yes. Besides that, he was also unfaithful. He worked at the center while my mom's family lived in a rural area. My grandfather got a girlfriend and they had a family together, and apparently to this second family, he was nice and caring.
What is wrong with your grandpa? Did you meet him?
Well, he passed away a couple of months before I was born, so I never knew him. He was violent towards his family, but he hated my mother. He used to pull her by the hair and slam her into the floor and onto the bed, and he would repeat until he got bored. And also, my mom had a lazy eye, of which he would always make fun of. When he was married to my grandmother, he had another family, and to them he was the perfect father and husband. Not really husband, since he was still married to my grandmother. And when it's the anniversary of his death, my aunt, the one from the other family he had, always shares pictures of him and says how amazing and loving my father was. When I ask about my grandfather, my mother always replies, "I don't have a father. He passed away while my mother was pregnant with me, and she was peer pressured to go to the funeral because other people around her were saying, 'He's still your father.'"
You must be random character in detective novel.
Oh my, yeah. Sometimes I feel like one. When I tell these stories, people always stare at me and they think I'm crazy.
One time I was told to stop talking. My life story is too dark. All I did was mention my grandpa, who would beat his daughters and forced my grandma to terminate a good pregnancy once. If you know what I mean. Sometimes I forget there are people that have normal lives.
Same here. Sometimes when I hear stories about back in the day, I'm always shocked.
You must be a random side character in a detective novel.
Same here. Sometimes when I hear stories about back in the day, I'm always shocked.
This was quite alright. This is an awesome story, for good and bad reasons. I need to make sure I understand. Question: were the grandfathers in one and for the same man? For your sake, I hope so.
Not a problem. Well, to answer your question, yes, they are the same person.
At the very beginning, you made a list of things. I have one question regarding number 2. My question is, was this in a time where no-fault divorce wasn't a thing yet?
The divorce was legal at the time, but apparently my uncle's wife had a few problems, such as jealousy and a few mental problems. But my family never talks about this, since they barely knew her.
This sounds like the stories I'm finding out about my extended family. Also, to add to this, I'm wondering if wars and toxin exposures had something to do with starting the cycle.
I don't know if my grandfather went to war, but it's possible, since my country at the time was at war. Toxin exposure, it's not likely to have happened, since at the time, the part of the country that my family lived in was underdeveloped. They didn't even have roads or infrastructures.
Your storytelling is wild. I was totally immersed. I will suggest something though. I wish you took into account more the use of punctuation, because there were some parts that I couldn't even read, such as the paragraph 2. Honestly, if storytelling is your thing, true or not, I encourage this so that your words get read. I know it sounds simple, and you probably already know this, but just think of the way you would speak. That's it. When you have a natural pause, use a comma. If you have to take a breath, use a period. Don't be sorry. I'm happy to help. Please keep sharing.
Oh my, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna edit these and try adding more punctuation. And yes, unfortunately, these stories are all real. If you have any tips, please share. I have always had this problem with punctuation. As an extra thing, by the way, someone deleted this question, so I'm going to reply to it. I think they asked me about the story number 1 from the beginning. The one about my grandpa ending his son's life after he was crying. It was intentionally. My grandmother had my uncle in her arms, and he was crying. My grandfather took my uncle from her arms and threw him in the ground. Thank you everyone for watching and listening. It does feel good to share this type of stories.